Chris Carter here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll break down the Steelers' 13-10 loss to the Cleveland Browns, what the Steelers need to do moving forward, Kenny Pickett, what his struggles are, and how far the blame goes from Tomlin to Canada to everybody else. Also, things the Steelers are doing right and what can be good for them down the stretch as they try to come back in the AFC North. It's time for the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So let's get into this Steelers loss. There's a lot to break down from it, a lot of different facets of it, but much of it points to the offense and how this loss was a bit different than the Steelers' other three losses before it. And why is that? Well, for one, the Steelers got the ground game, they got the defense, and they set everything up for a fourth quarter comeback, but it didn't happen. And you see the impact of a lack of execution, and it kills the Steelers in the big moments. Now, this lack of execution comes from multiple angles. Plays where the offensive line doesn't properly protect Kenny Pickett, and he's under pressure when he shouldn't be. Plays where the play calling isn't the best, and I do think that they're at a disadvantage in certain spots. Some plays where the play calling's there, and if there's a clear miscommunication, whether it's a receiver and the quarterback seeing the same thing, certain players mishearing or not hearing a certain call on the field, and sometimes that happens in hostile environments. Happens to lots of teams when they play the Steelers in Pittsburgh. So that's part of the territory there. I think it's a shout out to the crowd, the Browns crowd that was at the game, because they definitely made it a tough environment. But it boils back down to the mixed mess of problems the Steelers have on offense and the plays where you expect your quarterback to be able to make. And we'll get to other aspects here. But man, this is where I get back to it with Kenny Pickett, and that there are plays designed to simplify this offense to give him the easiest reads so that he can make the basic throws that can win these games. This is where the Steelers offense continues to stutter, is that when they're designing up things to try to make things simple because the passing game can't really take a step forward, and then those things aren't taken, it puts the offense way behind. And you can look through different things. We still don't have the all 22, so we can't see everything. But if you go back to the Steelers field goal drive in the fourth quarter, when they're marching downfield, the run game's working, everyone's moving the ball. And then on second down, the Steelers call a mixed passing play where they have Johnson running a shorter route over the middle, crossing over the middle of the field, and Calvin Austin running a deeper crossing pattern over the middle part of the field. Both of them beat their defenders, but Johnson beat his defenders so badly that he was wide open and his defender stopped running with him. It looked like his defender ran off to try to help against Calvin Austin or help against something. Kenny Pickett never sees him. He has time in the pocket. By the time that the pressure gets there, Deontay Johnson's kind of like run through his route and it's kind of done. And Kenny Pickett pulls the ball in, takes a sack that puts the Steelers in a position where even if he had just thrown that ball away, they at least would have had a chance to try to keep up with the sticks and move the chains on the next play to keep the red zone possession going. You can also go to the final drive where they got the ball back. It was tied. And they went three passes. The first pass, it's a wide open 5-yard out. No one's covering it. No one's bringing pressure. And Kenny Pickett just flat out misses Deontay Johnson. Then on the second play, he throws a ball. Kenny Pickett throws a ball. That's to nobody. No one was home. Meanwhile, Jaylen Warren and Pat Freiermuth were wide open underneath and not even looked at. And Kenny Pickett certainly glanced at Pat Freiermuth while he was trying to do a release from his block, but. It'd be one thing if Kenny Pickett saw something that was there and made that throw, and it just didn't work out. But there was nobody there for that throw to be made. There was no pressure in his face. that needed to be a play where he waited, used his patience, and took what was there. I look at those plays and I see, man, there's plenty of mistakes, and we don't even have the all 22 yet. And I know people are going to point to play calling, this, that, and the third, but I continue to maintain the biggest problem with this offense is not the play calls. It's the teaching of it's the execution. Because to me, these are plays that are called at the right times and the right ways to try to counter certain things. Even some of the screens that didn't work out for the Steelers. There was one play where Jaylen Warren had a ton of space in front of him. Mason Cole doesn't even touch the man in front of him, which allows him to run right into Kenny Pickett, which allows him to break up the pass. If Mason Cole just gives him a little bit of a shove before he runs into his screen to get in position for the screen, that gives Kenny Pickett the space, the time to make the simple throw, and who knows what Jaylen Warren does with the ball in his hands, because Jaylen Warren looks for real. And for me, something has to change about Kenny Pickett. And it's not just about the play calling at this point. It's about Kenny Pickett himself. He looks flustered way too easily in the pocket. He bails on clean pockets. He rushes his process in the throws. That's why I think you see so many inaccurate passes. And that has to change. One thing that has changed for the offense is that the run game is alive. It is serious and it is real. And that is very encouraging for the potential of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers ran for over 170 yards in the Browns. Nobody had done that all season long. Going into this week, the Browns were a top 10 rushing defense, and they had done a really good job of limiting their opponents on the ground. In this game, the Steelers were able to get loose, especially Jaylen Warren, who got his second straight 100-yard game. Really impressive for him. Really good stuff for him. And the combination of him and Najee Harris continues to pay off. Najee Harris not having his best game. I also think that it was kind of another example of when he was running, the holes weren't there. When Jaylen Warren was running, he made the holes happen, and he got it there. I think it continues to push the assertion that Jaylen Warren needs to be included more in this offense. So there's a lot there that the Steelers can do better as far as trying to figure that out. But I think they also tried to get Jaylen Warren more involved in this offense, but through the passing game, and it just didn't work out as well because of, again, execution. Right now, it looks like Jaylen Warren may be the best player on the Steelers offense, but that's not to slight guys like Broderick Jones and James Daniels, who I thought looked good too and were the better parts of the offensive line, especially in getting Harris and Warren the yards that they get. But Najee Harris, after the game, said a lot of things. He looked very frustrated, and one thing he said, he's tired of this bleep. And you can guess what the bleep was there, or you could just look up Najee Harris post-game Browns, and you can see him talking about that. And it goes back to something, I think, because I think that when you hear Najee Harris speak that kind of frustratedly about the offense, and he's a guy who's been very much about secrecy and trying to get everyone on the same page, for him to be that frustrated, it goes back to something I was talking about last week, both after the Packers win and during the week of practices, when we were asking players about what's changing for the offense for it to work. I want to explain that because to me, it looks like Mike Tomlin's got a secret he doesn't want everyone else to know, or at least wants to protect from the outside world for just his team to see. We'll talk about what that is and what I mean by that and how that's impacting everything the Steelers and could lead to maybe even a potential implosion if the Steelers aren't very careful about how they handle the rest of this season. All that and more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We have a lot more to discuss. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn helps you out because these days, every new potential hire you could bring into your business seems like a high-stakes wager for a small business. You need the right people on your team to help your small businesses fire on all cylinders. That's where LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find people you want to talk to and faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to create your network and beyond to get your network and get the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people on your side. Then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile, and that spreads the word to your hiring. So you're hiring, so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. You know, every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our discussion here about the Steelers' loss to the Browns and more focusing on the aftermath now. We'll get to the defense because I think that they played very well, and we'll talk about the potential move that could be coming to help the defense moving forward, as well as where they could be in the AFC North. But let's talk about Mike Tomlin for a second. Now, however you feel about Mike Tomlin, I think that there's clearly something that he is trying to protect here, and it continues to show itself as the offense continues to not break out. Now, y'all remember last week when I put the clips on this very show of me talking to Broderick Jones after the game against the Packers, where the Steelers got 200 yards on the ground. It looked really strong. And Broderick Jones was like, oh, yeah, well, we've been having team meetings with the running backs more, and that's helped the offensive line kind of figure out what we like to do and what they like to do. And then when we went to Najee Harris, we asked him what's different about the run game, and he said, I don't want to put it out there. It's not for public consumption there. And then when I was like, oh, so the meetings? And he was like, oh, wait, that was the private thing I didn't want people to know about there. And I just felt it was like, what's so private about player meetings? Like what's so private about that? I was like, that's weird. So then if y'all remember, I went and asked Mike Tomlin about it on Tuesday, and I want to play a real clip of you. Remember, this is me and how I'm asking it. I'm not asking if Broderick Jones does something very special. I just asked about what he said and about those meetings and how it's helping the team. And when I asked Mike Tomlin, he deflected in this manner.
Mike, Broderick talked about the importance of the meetings between the offensive line and the running backs to come together and help contribute to the weekly plan. How refreshing is that for a coach to see that kind of chemistry develop on your squad?
Broderick's just talking. Broderick, man, is like a oversized toddler, man. He loves to play football, man. He's flat getting after it. But don't start talking about all these little things that he's doing in preparation and so forth.
Mike, how do you evaluate? And if you remember, I wasn't talking about all these little things he's doing in preparation. I talked about specific meetings that he pointed out that Najee Harris confirmed. And nothing, and it was like, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about something else. So let's fast forward to after the Steelers lost to the Browns. Mike Tomlin's at the podium. I wasn't in Cleveland. I was at home, thankfully just resting. I've had y'all know I get busy and crazy, and I'm trying not to do too much. Also, I did a post-game show with Adam Bittner from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We did like a live post-game reaction show. It was pretty cool. So check that out if you missed that. I also was on the Final Word, Channel 11 WPXI after the game. So your boy's been busy. But here was Mike Tomlin after the game and this is him fielding questions about the offense. Here's one question that says, what do you have to do to get your offense going? He says, quote, the Browns have a really good defense. They make a lot of offenses look like that. Coupled with their venue, we have to give them some credit. We know their reputation. We knew their reputation in week 2. Maybe the rest of the NFL didn't. It's kind of been confirmed in the weeks after that, and obviously they were really good today. Then he's asked, is Steelers Kenny Pickett missing some confidence right now? Mike Tomlin just straight up says no further answer. Then he was asked, what do you see with Kenny that doesn't seem to be clicking? And he says, quote, I think the Cleveland Browns had a lot to do with that. I'd be disingenuous if I didn't compliment them on their players, their schematics, and how they played today. The venue component from an offensive perspective, there's a lot of things that were challenging today. And asked about Kenny Pickett's missed throws. He says, I don't know specifically what throws you're talking about. I'll let him speak for himself. Okay. First, I want to acknowledge people that are saying he's not telling us the truth. That's his job. His job is to not let us into the locker room. And I've said this a million times. That's what Bill Belichick did, even in the prime Brady days. When stuff isn't awry and stuff isn't great, you keep the media out of it. You keep the public out of it, because then when they're poking in things, then that's when more drama starts to unfold. And that is a good strategy for a head coach. But where this continues to show is that Mike Tomlin does not want people to see or to it seems like he's protecting something. He doesn't want people to see fully the problem that is within the Steelers offense. And it makes you think, who is he protecting here? Is he protecting Matt Canada? Is he protecting Kenny Pickett? Is he protecting both of them? And it makes me wonder a lot of things. Now, Mike Tomlin doesn't speak ill of Kenny Pickett. And he doesn't, it seems like he's trying to keep fingers from being pointed in the locker room, and that's fine. but we don't hear him come at Kenny Pickett when he has terrible games. In fact, you hear oftentimes when Mike Pizzuta, was asking, you can hear him on Steeler Nation radio a lot, and Mike Pizzuta brought up, and he was like, hey, what does Kenny Pickett have to do to get the fourth quarter production in all the quarters? And Mike Tomlin's like, can we just focus on the fourth quarter part? And I guarantee you, Mike Tomlin, he's always been a guy. He's like, I want more. I want to win more. I want to get better at these things. But he's not going to disparage his guys as much unless he feels it's necessary. And it's clear to me he doesn't feel like it's something that should be done for the Steelers. But this isn't new for Mike Tomlin as far as especially the quarterback position, because over the years, he's criticized a whole bunch of people. He's criticized the offensive line. He's criticized certain defenses and how they've executed. But in his time, when Ben Roethlisberger was playing, Mike Tomlin never went after Ben Roethlisberger. And I think he's treating Kenny Pickett in a similar way. Tomlin never pointed at Ben's mistakes. Even in his 5 interception games, he would find other things to talk about. And I always felt like that was his biggest flaw as a coach, was that he never challenged Ben Roethlisberger in the way that got in his face and said, you got to own up to your mistakes. Now, part of that might have also just been management, because the best coach, as I tell you all the time, the best coaches are often the best managers. The people that know how to handle people, they know how to read people, and they know how to get certain responses out of the guys and know how they'll respond to certain ways of treatment. Chuck Noll treated Terry Bradshaw differently than everyone else on the football team, and anyone who played on that 70s team will tell you as such. But that's part of the thing, and Tomlin treated Ben like that way. But the difference was when Mike Tomlin did that for Ben, and you asked those questions and you just rolled your eyes because you were thinking like, oh man, like, can he just acknowledge that Ben Roethlisberger was bad today? Can he just acknowledge that? Is he hiding something? All those questions would go away. Why? Because eventually Ben Roethlisberger had like a 5-touchdown game, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess he was right though to not panic and not say those things. And so he could be like, and so Mike Tomlin would often be like, see, y'all keep asking me those questions, and then this happens, and I'm telling you that's where that's not the issue that you think it is, and then everyone forgets about it, everyone moves on, and it's a happy story. But here's the thing. He's been doing that for Kenny Pickett, and Kenny Pickett hasn't been delivering. He hasn't had that breakout game yet. Everyone's been freaking out because Tommy DeVito from the Giants, who was a backup quarterback, had 3 touchdowns, and Kenny Pickett's never thrown 3 touchdowns in a game. And Kenny Pickett having those games, and Mike Tomlin not lambasting him or putting weight on it or trying to, I guess, distract attention elsewhere, I think it's getting old. It's been old with the fans. Fans have kind of been over it. But as I tell y'all, like, again, it ain't about us as reporters. It ain't about you as fans. When Mike Tomlin's talking, he is talking specifically to protect his locker room and to protect his players. And there's certain players who will call out because he wants to spark something in them. He wants to challenge them in certain ways. And maybe he sees Kenny Pickett as not the guy that to do that. But I'll tell you who else thinks that this is getting kind of old. I think the Steelers do. And I think that's where Najee Harris was talking about. He's tired of this. Because when this offense came in, I remember, this offense came in this year, they were terrible. They weren't playing well. Najee Harris was the one who called the meeting, who was like, we're going to get this together. And to what he could, the offense got it together. They started running the ball. And they're doing it really well right now. Back-to-back really strong weeks of executing on the ground. And it sounds like Najee Harris is tired of that just being the ground game and wants that to also be the pass game. Now, again, this might be also Matt Canada. I think it probably is also Matt Canada a little bit, because Najee Harris also pointed out that some of the play calls were expected from the other team, but he also said some of the play calls. And I think that's where this starts to get to be a point where it could boil over if Mike Tomlin isn't careful. Because if this is a team thing about Kenny Pickett, if there's multiple players and coaches, or even just players, if it's just players who think that Kenny Pickett has been a problem and has not been addressed for it in the way that holds everyone accountable in the same way, that would be a big thing on Tomlin if something boiled over because of that. And then he lost the locker room. Mike Tomlin has never lost a locker room in all his years of coaching for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that, to me, is the most dangerous thing, a powder keg that is sitting there right in the Steelers locker room, that if he does not tiptoe and tread carefully enough, it could light a fuse that leads to an explosion that could cause major problems for the Steelers locker room and trying to keep together this core that they want to build for the future. But bottom line is, regardless of what Mike Tomlin says to the media or doesn't say to the media, if this offense does not figure it out soon, something will have to change, or more players will start losing it and will start showing their impatience and will start acting out. And then it will become that much harder to contain. That has to change if the Steelers hope to be a good team this year. But the defense, sure, they gave up a game-winning field goal drive late in the game, but I think they're trending up, and I think they're trending way up for a good reason. We'll talk about that defense, potential move that could be right around the corner for the Steelers, and everything else that's going on for this team as they try to stay in this AFC North race. All that and more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We still have a lot to discuss. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by DoorDash. Why root for your team on an empty stomach? Order on DoorDash and save on their football watch party favorites. Order pizza, wings, pop, burgers, or anything from DoorDash and get it all delivered without missing the game. For me, I ordered, listen, I told you I was in Pittsburgh. I ordered me some Big Shot Bob's, got my Frank White wings, and I was so happy, even though we were watching the worst offense ever. But the wings, they make it so much better, and that's where DoorDash comes into play, and they get delivered. You can also get things like Permani's local favorites delivered right to your door. Even if you're not in Pittsburgh, you got a favorite around your town, go get your favorite delivered right to your door with DoorDash. And right now you can get 50% off the $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Subject to change, terms and conditions apply. And you want more value, get the Dash Pass membership, and that can get you free delivery on all eligible orders, whether it's for groceries or restaurant favorites. And again, that's 50% off your first DoorDash order up to $10 in values when you spend $15 or more on that first order. And that's and that's something you could get on the DoorDash app, which you can download right to your phone. And when you do so, enter the code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED 23, all capital letters, all one word, subject to change, terms and conditions apply. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our discussion about the Steelers. And y'all, let's talk about the defense, because as much as we can be down in the dumps about this offense, that defense played its heart out. Yes, they did give up a game-winning drive at the end of the game, but man, they were kicking butt for most of it. Excuse me while I take a sip of water. But Landon Roberts, he looked like Superman at times for this defense. 15 tackles, flying all over the field, cutting off the short passes. The Browns tried to get him in space in one-on-ones, and he was looking solid the entire time. I can't wait to go back and look to see like how well he did in certain spots, because I just felt like watching the broadcast on CBS that he just continued to be in the right spots all throughout the game. And it sounds like, according to Josina Anderson, that the rumor about Miles Jack, there could be fire to that smoke. And some people might be questioning, is that a bad thing? I don't think so. I think it's a good thing. You get a guy that knows your system. He's an NFL veteran. Yes, if he's in shape, if he's been working, you can work him into the defense. It won't take as long, and then you don't have a practice squad guy there. And Miles Jack, I felt like last year, yeah, he wasn't great, but he could be stabilizing. And next to Landon Roberts, who I think is playing at a high level, that could be a lot better than necessarily what it was next to Devin Bush. Just me, though. But either way, even Miles Jack doesn't come back. I thought the defensive performance was good. And it was another good sign that the Steelers defense is trending in the right direction, even with all the injuries they're sustaining right now. The defensive line was on it. Keanu Benton is good. This is only the third time the Browns didn't get 100 yards on the ground this season. Only the third time. They crushed the ground game. The Steelers did. They won the trenches. That's the thing. They won the trenches. Go back and look at the totals in this game as far as rushing and how these teams did. The Browns rushed for 96 yards. The Steelers rushed for 172. The Browns averaged 3.3 yards on the ground. The Steelers averaged 6.6 yards on the ground. The Steelers literally doubled the production of yards per carry in the Browns in this game. And if you had told me that, I would have said, oh, the Steelers easily won that game. That's, again, where I go back and I say more of this needs to be on Kenny Pickett, because if Matt Canada is so bad at the offense, why were they able to run the ground ball, run the run game? Because if the plays are always going to be bad there, they shouldn't execute there either. And again, Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, heck of a 1-2 punch, becoming more dangerous every single week for all the different things that they're able to do. But again, back to this defense. The run defense was there. The linebackers were there. The defensive line were there. They won the trenches. And also the guys in coverage were pretty solid. Patrick Peterson looks like he's finding his place in this defense. He's breaking up passes. He's not being the victim of so many big plays on the other side. I think that's worth noting. Joey Porter Jr., I thought he held up pretty well against Amari Cooper. He got beat like once or twice by Cooper, and then he got called for a penalty I thought was kind of ticky-tack. But Joey Porter Jr. showed the fight that you want to show against a veteran wide receiver. Trenton Thompson, the safety that they brought in to kind of fill in and help there in the backfield. He missed a couple plays, and Miles Killebrew came in. They both did solid jobs. They were in position, made some big tackles, and they could have been better in certain spots, but I thought they were pretty solid. The defense, should be getting Minka Fitzpatrick soon back, so we'll see how that impacts things, but it won't matter if all these defensive things continue to work. Again, 13 points in any NFL game. Your defense allows only 13 points in today's NFL. You should win that football game. It just has to happen. But it won't matter if the Steelers defense continues to have such great games where they limit a team to less than 2 touchdowns total. And then nothing comes of it. This is where it goes back to Pickett and the passing offense. Because again, the rushing offense is there. The offensive linemen move people. The running backs hit the seam. This has to get fixed on offense. And again, we're not talking about fancy things, a magic pill. We're talking about Kenny Pickett hitting the open man, throwing it to the guy who's there on time, right spot. If he learns how to do that consistently, this team becomes so much more dangerous. Because then again, you can't focus on one thing. You can't just focus on Jaylen Warren or Najee Harris or anyone else. You have to focus on all the things. And that's where I have Kenny Pickett being the biggest person holding back the Steelers at some points. Again, there's other points with other guys. I think, again, Matt Canada is not above dispute, but I keep telling y'all, I don't think that Canada is the play calling problem as much as he is the teaching problem. And maybe that's stunting Kenny Pickett's development. But that still does not excuse it for all the stunting development theories. And that's all they are, is theories. What isn't a theory is the tape that shows open guys in different parts of the field, some in the middle, some down the sideline, and he's still missing them consistently. Like even that one catch he threw to George Pickens in the fourth quarter where George Pickens had to kind of dive and hold on to it. That was an iffy throw. That's where I'm at with Kenny Pickett, is that if he does not progress, this team will be hard pressed to win anything this year. But if he just takes those simple steps forward, just starts taking the throws that are right there, the 5-yard slants, the 5-yard outs, those little things that are designed to make the offense easier for him, this defense can go and compete with a whole bunch of problems. Just me, though. We'll see how things continue to look out. We still got to wait for the All-22 film that hasn't come out yet. That's when I'll give my full breakdown and analysis, maybe a film thread on Twitter to go with it. But then, of course, we will have our Stars and Skulls grades segment tomorrow, Tuesday, on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. We hope that you enjoyed this Locked On Steelers episode. Hang in there, Steelers fans. I know this was a rough one, but this team is far from done. They're only 6-4 right now. And they have this game against the Bengals with a backup quarterback. And I know people are saying, well, they just played a backup quarterback, but the Bengals do not have the defense the Browns do, nor do they have the offensive line that the Browns do. And that could be the big factor that really helps the Steelers in this contest. And if you look at the Steelers and where they are right now, how they're playing, if they're able to get to 7-4, They're coming back at home to play the Cardinals and the Patriots, which will give them a chance to go to 9-4. And then all of a sudden, you have 4 chances to get into 4 games in your last 4 games to get you 10 wins this year, get you double digits in wins, and potentially make you a playoff team. But again, we got to talk about all the breakdowns to get you there in the first place. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Thanks again for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'll see you tomorrow when we do some stars and skull grades on the Steelers' loss to the Cleveland Browns.